Well, good morning again, everyone. Such a great pleasure to be here with you. Now, I don't know how this is going to work because I am not used to being tied somewhere, okay? So my hands need to go, I need to move, so we'll make it work as best as we can. You know, I am part Italian, so when my hands are tied, I cannot talk any longer, so. Again, as I told you this morning at Mass, it's great joy for me to be out here, get to. You know, Steve broke it, and it's all, as he breaks everything out, if it goes wrong at Mass, I always blame Steve. So I blame Steve or his wife, Jen. It's one of their faults. It's never my fault or anybody else's fault. It's Steve or Jen's fault. Now, I am a little confused here this morning, though, because as I was listening to my bishop speak, he said this conference is about vocations. Steve told me that my topic was, this is not what you look for in a priest when you're looking at somebody. So I was quite confused, but Steve, thanks for not telling me the truth that I was an example here. This is not what you look for in a priest. Well, as Steve told you, talking about me a little bit this morning, you know, yes, I actually did start off in the permanent diaconate formation program for the Diocese of Scranton back in 2013, and it was something that I did not see coming in my direction, but it had that seed had been planted. We always talk about planting the seed and saying something to someone if we feel that they have a vocation. So we had to step back to 2011 as my mother was battling pancreatic cancer and was not doing very well, and the deacon from my home parish would stop by on occasion to visit with her and to bring her communion. And I happened to be home one day when he showed up, and we were sitting at the table, and he looked at my mother and he said, "Janet," he says, "one day your son's going to become a deacon." And I looked at him, and I may not have been the nicest person back then. And I looked at him and I said, "With all due respect, Bobby," I says, "you're out of your frickin' mind." I said, that's never going to happen. There is no way, no chance. You'd have a better chance of seeing God come down from heaven and appear before you. And there it was. See? So all it took was that seed. And he put that seed in my head, and I unfortunately went through the loss of my mother not too long after that. And in the meantime, I quit my job. Towards the end of my mother's life when she did not want to go into a facility to be cared for. So I quit my job. I stayed home and I took care of my mother in order for her to be able to stay home and not have to go to a facility. And did whatever I had to do in order to make that happen for her. That was her wish, and we were going to honor her wish however we had to. And it was through that is where God began to make a major change in my life. I actually, because I wasn't working, I actually became more active and more involved in my church. Yes, I went to church. I went to church on Sunday, and that was it. I went home and had no involvement in the church other than that. And it was through my mother's illness that I went and I was trained to be a Eucharistic minister. I was trained to be an adult altar server. I was helping adult altar serve funerals and that. I was never an altar server as a child. I never was really involved, and that's how I became involved. And then it escalated. It escalated not long after that into we had a major 3-day festival every year in August, and I became the chairman of that. And I realized that I had gotten myself in way too deep. Ever feel that way, that you've gotten yourself in way too deep and there's no way to dig yourself out of everything that you're doing? And the one day It was like God struck me over the head with a skillet and said, you are called to do this. And I fought it for a long time. And the end of the day, I called my pastor and I said to him, I would like to meet with you to discuss something. He says, okay. So on Sunday, we met after Mass. We went for coffee and we started talking. And I told him my feelings. I told him what I thought I was called to do. And he said, wonderful. He says, this is what you have to do. So I did what he told me to do. I went to some information sessions. I filled out the application and was accepted into the program in March or April of 2013 to start in the fall. And I remember calling the deacon from my home parish, and I said, Bobby, can we meet for coffee? So one night we met at McDonald's for coffee, and I looked at him, I says, you were right. I said, boy, do I hate to admit that. I said, but you were right. I says, I didn't tell you I applied, but I was accepted into the Permanent Diaconate program. I'm going to begin in the fall. And he was elated. And he said, you see, you just never know what's going to happen when you mention something to somebody. And I tell this to everybody all the time. I talk about this all the time in Mass. When we see something, we have to say something because we never know. And if we don't say something, if we're afraid to say something, we may never implant that seed into that person. We may never allow that seed to grow, to be nurtured. And we deny that person the opportunity to explore if they do have a vocation or not. That is entirely between them and God. But if we don't say something to somebody, they may never realize it. They may never know, and they may never have the opportunity to explore that option that they have in their life. And that is a great disjustice to our faith, to God, and to those around us if we allow them to go through life not realizing and not understanding just exactly if they have that call or not. It's not up to us to make the final decision. It's between them and God. So I entered the Permanent Diaconate program, and it was crazy because I was the youngest, obviously. I was the youngest person in that class at 37 years old. And there was one other guy a few years older than I am. And we were, both single males entering into the Permanent Diaconate program. And the other guys were there. And we would meet 2 weekends a month. One weekend a month we would meet that we stayed overnight. The other weekend, it was just an all-day Saturday event that we would get together. And it was on those overnights where we gathered at the old seminary in the Diocese of Scranton. They had turned it into more of a retreat center by then. They had stopped using it as a seminary. But that's where we met because they had the rooms to provide for us to stay overnight. And sometimes on a Friday night after we were all done, we would all be raiding the kitchen and sitting there and seeing whatever we could find in the kitchen. Sometimes it was wine and cheese, sometimes crackers, sometimes it was just ice cream. Sometimes we just sat around the table and talking. And about 6 months, 8 months into that first year, some of the wives kept telling me and asking me, why was I there? I was starting to get, after the first, 3 or 4 times, you start to get a little complex. And I'm like, and I was getting mad. And finally, I said to them, well, fine. If you don't want me here, I'll quit. I don't need this. I said, I don't need you. I don't need this. I can quit. I will go back to my normal life. And that's it. I don't need to be bothered with this. And they're like, stop. They're like, you don't get it. I'm like, apparently I'm not getting it. So I needed something to fall on my head. They're like, you're young and you're single. I said, well, I don't know if I'm young, but I'm single. And they're like, you need to be a priest. And I said, what? I said again, what did you say? I think I got up from the table in disgust, and I may have said something I shouldn't have said, and I walked away. So, I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. This is ridiculous. As I'm walking away, I know I turned around, I looked at him, I said, that will never happen. Never. You're right, never say never, right? I said, you're all crazy. I said, just give it up, forget about it. I said, work on Michael. I said, just leave me out of this. I was content. I was set in my life. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was working. I traveled around whenever I wanted to. I did the things I wanted to do. There was no way I was going to be tied down being a priest. That's why I never got married. I was not getting married because I didn't want to be tied down in my life. So, and that was just the way my life operated. I just didn't want to be tied down. And I got mad at them, and I left them for the night, and I went to my room, thinking all the way to my room, these ladies are crazy, absolutely crazy. So the next time we were together overnight, they're like, you know, you shouldn't be here. And I just put a smile on my face. Under my breath, I'm probably saying go to hell to all of them. But I just have this smile on my face, and I'm like, okay, great, thanks. I'll remember that. And they kept it up. And it was like every time we were together overnight, I heard that same line come out of their mouths. I didn't know what they were doing at the time. They were implanting the seed. They were trying to get me to accept that seed that they were trying to implant into me, to experience it, to allow it to be nurtured, allow it to grow. And of course, I was too stupid at the time to realize it. And kept going home thinking, this is crazy. I need to get out of this, you know. How am I gonna get out of this? Because there's no way. And it's unbelievable. I'm standing before you as a priest of 5 years, and I was adamant that it was never going to happen. Well, I took their advice. I listened to them. I listened to God. I allowed that seed to be nurtured, allowed it to grow. And I thought, I have nothing to lose than to explore what the options are. So it was the end of that first year of diaconate formation, and we had to have these meetings at the end. So you met with 3 different people at the end. You got called, you had to go meet with 3 different people. And as I met through the guys, I met with the priest who was the priest in charge of the permanent diaconate formation program. And I said to him, what if I want to go become a priest? I said, how do I do that? Well, you don't need to worry about that, right? You have time, he says, but you'd have to make a decision before you were ordained a permanent deacon, because permanent means permanent, and you can't change it. Yes, Monsignor, great, thank you very much. You were a great help to me, thanks. So it was about 2 weeks later, I called my pastor and I said, could we meet? And he's like, sure. He's like, what's up? And I told him exactly what was going on. He's like, we don't need to meet, he says. I'll take care of it. So at the time, my home pastor was the judicial vicar for the diocese. So I talked to him on a Saturday afternoon, and I knew he went to Scranton on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but Monday, unknowing to me, on Monday morning after his morning mass, he hopped in the car and drove to Scranton, which was about an hour or so from my hometown. And I'm at work that morning and I get a phone call. I get a strange phone call, and I'm like, well, I'm not answering this because I don't know this number. I will not answer it. And it was the vocations director for the Diocese of Scranton calling me because my pastor had paid him a personal visit that morning to discuss me. Great, thank you. I called my home pastor. I said, I told you didn't have to do that right away. I said, it's more like take your time, forget about it so I can forget about it and just continue on with my life. And he's like, oh, no. He says, I had to make sure this got taken care of right away. I'm like, thanks so much. So I called the vocations director back. This was Monday, and on Thursday was my day off from work, and so I scheduled a meeting with him on Thursday. So Thursday came, I drove to Scranton, I met with him. He gave me the application and said, take your time, fill out the application, and when you're done with it, get it back to me. This was Thursday. It happened to be we happened to be going into the 4th of July weekend. So I knew that I had Sunday and Monday. I think Monday was 4th of July. I knew I had Monday off of work and Sunday and Monday off work. So I took the weekend and I filled out the application. And it was easy because part of the application I had was really just stuff from my permit, the academic application. I just transferred over. And then I needed 3 recommendations from priests. And I'm like, I don't know 3 priests. Then who am I going to ask? I don't know anybody. So I had become good friends with the secretary from my parish, and I called her up. I'm like, Sandy, I need priest recommendations. Oh, no problem, she says. No problem, she says. I'll have them for you tomorrow. I'm like, thanks, Sandy. You're the best. Everybody was working against me, I felt like, right? I'm trying to drag my feet through the mud, and everybody's on top of everything. So it was the next day, it was Tuesday, and I had everything in place, and I had the application all completed. I called the vocations director. I said to him, I have the application completed. I said, so whenever you want me to, do you want me to mail it to you? How do you want to get to it? He's like, excuse me? I said, I have the application all completed for you. He's like, it's been 4 days. Yeah, and your point is it's been 4 days. He says, it takes guys 4 months to fill out the application. I said, oh. I said, well, I'll call you in 4 months then. I said, I don't know what to tell you. He's like, no. He's like, can you meet on Thursday? I'm like, well, I have to work on Thursday. I said, this isn't going to work out too well. He said, well, Thursday. I said, I have to work on Thursday. So this whole thing started off with a lie because I had to lie to my boss as to why I couldn't work on Thursday when he wanted me to work. So I get, hopefully God has forgiven me about the few lies I had to tell in order to get there. So I lied to my boss. I went to Scranton with the application, and everything started to roll. It's a couple of days later, he calls me back. He says, you have to meet with the board and the bishop next Tuesday. I'm like, Tuesday? I said, I can't meet on a Tuesday. I said, I work. I says, I can't tell my boss why I can't work. I said, he'll fire me. He won't deal with this. Said, well, you have to be here on Tuesday. Go in, lie to the boss again. I can't work on Tuesday. I have to lie again. Well, then if you can't work on Tuesday, you'll work on Thursday on your day off. I'm like, okay, fine. So go to Scranton on Tuesday, go through interview with the board, sat with the bishop, had the interview, and I said, okay. I said, well, whenever they make a decision, I'll talk to you then, I guess. And I was in the car on my way back to Scranton, and he calls me. He says, okay. He says, you're good to go. He says, now Thursday you're going to get in the car. Thursday you're going to get in the car. You're going to drive down to Baltimore, Maryland. He says, you have an interview with the seminary. You're going to meet with the rector. You're going to meet with this one. You're going to meet with that one. And you have to be there by 10 a.m. I can't go on Thursday. Why not? I have to work. Do you realize I lied to get out of work today to come and see and do this? I have to make up the time. You have to be in Baltimore at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning. Great. Go home, lie again. Boy, what a great way to start this off, right? All these wonderful lies. My boss, I was working at the time. I was working for a family-owned car dealership in my hometown, and the owner was not Catholic, but his wife was Catholic. His wife actually belonged to my home parish, but he just, wouldn't understand. There was no getting this idea into his head. So, well, okay. So we'll just start off this whole life with lie after lie after lie. What's worst thing going to happen? God's going to smite me, strike me with lightning. I don't know. Something's going to happen. So anyhow, I got myself out of work again on that Thursday. I called a friend up. I said, "You want to take a ride to Baltimore with me?" "Sure, I'll go. No problem." So we go down to Baltimore. Spent the day down there. Did all the interviews and did what I had to do and got in the car and drove home. And I had just gotten back to my hometown, and my phone rings. It's the vocations director. I'm like, oh boy. Great. This will be the end of this. I'm gonna just, I'm like, I didn't feel like things went well in Baltimore. I'm like, great. They're gonna say no. I'm gonna just, hang up the phone from them. I'm gonna go on with my life and be a happy little camper. And he calls and he says, all right, you're all set to go, he says, and you leave in 2 weeks. What? 2 weeks? I have a job. How do I quit my job? So, okay, okay. He's like, well, you want to wait till next year? You can wait till next year. I said, well, you know what? I said, if I wait till next year, it's not going to happen. If I wait till next year, I'm going to chicken out, I'm going to back out, and this nightmare is going to be over from what I decided to do, because I must be crazy. And I said, you know what? I said, no, let's just go with it. God's calling me in this direction. Everything happens so fast for a reason. I said, I'm going to just jump right into the fire and see what happens. So next day I go to work, and I give him a 1 week's notice, because I figured I needed a week to get myself together. I needed to. I had a house. I needed to close up my house. I needed to pack stuff. I hadn't been in school for almost 20 years. I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I need. This is crazy. I'm going from living in my house to going to a place where I'm going to have to walk down the hall to go to the bathroom. I'm going to have to walk down the hall to go take a shower. Like, this is crazy. This is insane. So I go on, and my boss looks at me and says, 1 week. That's all you can give me is 1 week. And then the guilt trip starts to fly. I'll give you 10 days, I said, but I can't give any more than 10 days. I need a couple of days. Well, why you quit? What do you? So then I had to tell him, and he's like, what are you, crazy? He's like, you're nuts? You're stupid? Oh. Thanks, Earl. Yeah, I guess I am. I'm stupid, I guess. Thank you, though. And then my sales manager comes to me and says, oh, now I get it. He said, you're one of those. I said, excuse me? Now I know, he says, you're one of those perverts, aren't you?
Whoa.
And I looked at him, I said, you know, Jim, I said, I think I would just shut your mouth right now. I said, I was a Catholic man also, by the way. So I think I would stop right there. And he went on and he said something else that does not bear repeating. And I looked at him and I said, well, Jim, I guess that means your wife is one of those as well, isn't she? He looked at me and he said, what are you talking about? I said, well, your wife's a teacher. I said, she's around those same people all the time, isn't she? And that shut him up for sure. I thought, I'm not going to put up with comments, nasty comments being made like that, because I was setting off in a new direction. I was going to do this. And I see the man on occasion. I run into him occasionally. And, I have forgiven him. But sometimes I just can't forget when I see his face, those words that came out of his mouth at me that day, because that was obviously far from the truth as to why we are called to do the things that God calls us to do. And so anyhow, I dropped everything in my life and I prepared myself and I went off to seminary, and I was not prepared for what would happen next in my journey, because we did everything so fast. Within about a month's time, my life was completely turned upside down, and I went from being just a normal, happy person to being a guy who was back in school, almost at that point, 39 years old, going back to school for the first time. And I didn't know how to act. I didn't know what to do. I figured I'm not going to be able to do this. And so I got down to St. Mary's Seminary and University in Baltimore, Maryland. And I was there a couple weeks. And I remember it was the first day I was going to meet my mentor. I had to meet with my mentor for the first time. And I go upstairs to the 4th floor to his apartment. And my mentor is this little tiny Filipino priest, weighs about 10 pounds, soaking wet. And I was a lot larger than I am right now. And I ring his doorbell. He opens his door, and I get the and I'm thinking in the back of my head, oh shit, this isn't going to be good, is it? He looks me up and down about 5 or 6 times. And the first words that come out of his mouth, ooh, Mr. Simchock, you're fat. No, I take that back. You're very fat. I think to myself, do I run away? Like, what do I do? Mr. Simchock, we don't want fat priests. You should have done something about that before you got here. That was my welcome. That was my beautiful welcome to seminary. And it didn't get much better from that point on. And I thought to myself, what was worse than he actually was one of my teachers for my first semester. And I was doomed. This guy hated me. This guy was not happy with me. And of course, it reflected in every mentor meeting I had with him, and it reflected in his class as well, because I probably could have cured cancer. I probably could have brought Jesus back to life, brought him off the cross, and I could have probably done a few other things. And this guy still would have said I was fat, I was wrong, and still would have failed me. So thankfully I had the support of the diocese, and the diocese had come to my rescue on several times. They came down to the seminary and tried to get the seminary to get this guy to stop the harassment, stop everything. But you know what? I look at as I look back at things, I know that his actions, his words made me a stronger person. They made me more determined to get through seminary formation and got me to ordination. And it took a change in seminaries. I got out of Baltimore after my second year, and I transferred up to Pope St. John the 23rd National Seminary, which is in Weston, Massachusetts. It was a great place, a great fit for me, and they helped me persevere. They helped me to become a priest, to become a stronger priest, to become, a stronger person in whole than I was before I had entered, and especially during my 2 years at St. Mary's in Baltimore. And it was a life experience. It was a very strong learning experience for me to realize that there are challenges that we're going to meet, challenges that we're going to have to put up with as we journey through our discernment. And this is what it is. It's a discernment process that we do. And by the way, that was not the only resistance I had. I actually then encountered resistance at John the 23rd, at that seminary as well, where I had a lay professor, female professor, who did not like the way I did a presentation in her classroom, and called me out into the hallway and looked at me and says, "If I were you, I would go upstairs, I would pack my bags, and I would leave." She says, "Because if I ever sat in a pew in your church and listened to you give a homily," she says, "I would probably have to get up and leave, and I would not want to be your parishioner." I said, "Thank you." I said, "Thank you very much." I said, "I appreciate your words." I says, "But with all due respect," I said, "you do not have that authority to tell me to go upstairs and pack my bags. You do not have the authority to tell me if I should or should not become a priest." I says, "You've been doing this long enough." I said, "You know that if I become a priest or not, it's between me and God, and maybe my bishop too, because he has to make bishop has to make the final decision." But it really is all about the person discerning and God. Nobody else has a right to tell anybody that they won't make a good priest, they won't be a good priest, or they shouldn't be a priest, or a deacon at that. It's a discernment between you and God. I learned a lot of lessons in those years. By the way, the year after I left seminary and was ordained, she was not invited back to teach at that seminary anymore. And of course, that was in part to me because I did report her, and I felt that the rector of that seminary needed to know exactly what these people were doing to potential vocations and to the people who were there to become priests. Apparently, this woman had a track record of doing this to guys. She had one or two in each of her classes that she just pinpointed that she didn't like, and this is what she did to them. Nobody had the guts to stand up to her. Nobody had the guts to go and report her, except for I did, because I had gone through way too much of this beforehand, and I just felt I came out of it stronger than I was when I went into it. But somebody else, that was going to destroy a potentially valuable vocation to the priesthood. And So I felt it was my duty to say something. Just like it's our duty to say something when we see something. You know, we go travel in bigger cities. If you're ever traveling in the bigger cities, the airports, the subway systems, or whatever, there's signs everywhere that says, if you see something, say something, right? It's to keep us safe. But as good Catholics, if we see something, we're supposed to say something. I mean, when we see something in a young man, young woman, who might have a call, we have to say something to them. And by the way, men, you know, in my class up at John the 23rd up in Western Mass, I had two guys in my class that were permanent deacons, that were coming out of that and were going to become priests because of life situations, and one who had lost his wife, and one who was divorced and had their marriage annulled. Now, gentlemen, I would not advise doing your wives in or anything like that. If you have any ideas of becoming a priest, definitely don't go that route, please. I warn Jen all the time to be careful that Steve doesn't, try to do something like that. I pick on Steve a lot as my deacon. Jen's my organist. Steve's my deacon, but he picks on me just as bad. So. But Steve is very quick to call out every time I do something wrong. You know, he's like those professors at the seminary. You know, that next he's going to tell me I shouldn't be a priest. No, he would never do that. He would never do that. It's all in good fun, but you know, it was a very long journey to get to the priesthood, but. The last 5 years of my life have been remarkable. I wouldn't change them for the world. But like Steve said to you, Steve, when I got to St. Anne's in Williamsport, Steve gave me the title of Father Linka Parish because I had been involved in 2 linkages in my time as assistant, and I came out to St. Anne's to be the administrator, pastor of it. I knew when the bishop called me to go out there, I knew I was going out there for a short period of time. I was going out there for about 2 years until they were ready to link that parish to another parish. And obviously I couldn't say anything when I had first gotten there to the people. But as word came out and word began to spread, it's become very difficult. You don't realize how much you fall in love with the people of your parish. You don't realize how much you fall in love just with your parish, period. When you get somewhere, you go, and you're like, okay, you know I'm going here for 2 years. I'm not going to get involved. I'm not going to get close. And you're just going to do what you have to do. And then you get somewhere, and all things change. All things change, and there's just such a great love and respect for the people. And it didn't help at the fact that the day I was moving in, it was September 7th of 2023. I'm moving into the parish, and I don't even think I had my car in park in the driveway of the rectory, and people are standing outside my door yelling and screaming that we need this, we need that, we need this fixed, that needs to be fixed. We need a new handicap accessible ramp on the church. We need this, that. First off, could you let me turn the car off, please? Can you give me some room so I could open the door and get out of the car? Could I get myself situated? And then maybe can we talk? I wasn't a construction person. I knew nothing about construction. I needed help. I needed guidance. Thank God for the diocese, they had that. And they sent that to me. But God works in really, truly mysterious ways in our lives. I mean, how mysterious did he work in me, from where he took me from I would never be a priest to here I am standing here right now before you, a priest of 5 years. We just celebrated 5 years last month. And, God willing, hopefully another, year or two before I leave this world. And it'll be good, at least get me into the next parish, and let's see what we could do there before he calls me. I said, I joke, but I don't joke, because all the males in my family died between 50 and 52, and the women died between 60 and 65. I have a very short bloodline, and I'm on the verge of turning 50. So I tell everybody, well, hopefully I'll could at least have 2 more good years of priesthood before the good Lord calls me home. And like I said at Mass this morning, I certainly hope that I go up and not down, because I learned out here the last couple of days, I really do not like this heat and humidity, and I'm not sure if I could handle going down and having to live that life in eternity. My friends, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention to you too, my deacon from my home parish. I told him over coffee that I was entering into the permanent diaconate program, but I also played a nasty trick on him when I was leaving. I called him, I said, could we have coffee? And we met at the same McDonald's again for coffee, and I looked at him, I said, Bobby, I have to tell you, he says, I'm leaving the permanent diaconate program. That's all I said to him, and he looked at me, and his mouth opened, and he started talking. He said to me, I knew it, he says. I knew you would never be able to make it through the program and become a permanent deacon. Now, wait a minute, Bobby. A year ago, you said, I'm so happy because I knew you'd make a great deacon. Now you're sitting there telling me, I knew you wouldn't make it through. Well, what is it? What side of the story is it? I let him finish. And I looked at him, I says, you didn't let me finish. I said, I'm leaving the permanent diaconate program. I said, but I'm entering into seminary to become a priest. Well, if he did have false teeth, they fell onto the table and onto the floor, because he was so shocked, so stunned. He didn't have another word to say. All he said to me is, I have to get home to my wife, and it abruptly ended the coffee and the conversation that evening. My friends, if you take anything from what I talked about today, the battles, the ups and downs of going through formation, and that, the only thing that you really need to take home from this, and you need to go back to your parishes and continue to spread around your parishes, is that if you do see something, you have to say something. You have to plant that seed. Look at the wives in the deacon program when I was going through it, put those seeds into me. And I was stupid at that moment to realize what they were getting at. I was too stupid to see what they were doing. But when God hit me over the head, then I opened my eyes and I realized what they were doing. And I talked to most of them yet to this day, because those guys have all, had all become deacons. And I talked to those wives, and we still joke and laugh about it. We laugh about those days when they would do that to me. But if it wasn't for them, I would have never realized, I would have never explored the opportunity to do this. And I'm forever grateful to them for planting the seed. And we need to go out there to our parishes and continue to plant the seed. I started many different things in my parish over the last 2 years. We have a vocations chalice. The Knights of Columbus purchased us a vocations chalice. We had a deacon from another parish who did woodworking make a case for it. We have the traveling vocations chalice right now. It goes out to homes for a week or 2 weeks at a time or 3 weeks at a time. They put it in a prominent place in their home. and they pray around it every day for vocations. We do a vocations prayer at the end of daily Mass each and every day. We recite a vocations prayer. And we talk about vocations a great deal. And I am happy that I could actually stand here this morning and say, about 3 weeks ago, I had a young man in my parish call me, wanted to meet with me. And the first words out of his mouth is, "Father, I believe I have a call to the priesthood." And I've linked him up now with the vocations director so he can start the process. He's going into 11th grade right now, but this is the time for the vocations director to take over, time for the vocations director to allow his duty to work and allow to carry this kid over to that point. You're going to have a wonderful speaker tomorrow. Rhonda Greenwald is going to be here tomorrow. She's the one that gave us a lot of these ideas in the diocese a few years ago when she came out to speak at our convocation about that, about the things we could be doing in our parish to call upon vocations. My friends, if you see something, say something. Vocations are so important. Steve is getting ready to get the hook to get me off of this, away from this podium. So he does this to me at church too if I've talked too long. Although he's the one that always tells me 25-minute homilies, and then he corrects himself and says, "Oh no, I told you 2 to 5 minutes." I said. But my friends, thank you for allowing me this time to talk to you, to share my vocation story with you, but to remind you it's all of our jobs. It's not just the priest, it's not just the deacon. It's the deacons, the priests, the wives, the family members, and the people sitting in the pews to plant the seed and help those to experience if they do have a call. Nobody can tell them yes or no. It's between them and God, maybe their bishop and vocations director. But if we don't nudge a person along the way, they're never going to know, and we could really be missing out on some wonderful deacons and wonderful priests in our faith and in our churches. And we know that we need both deacons and priests, especially nowadays, as the need for them gets bigger and bigger. As the number of priests continue to dwindle, deacons will have to pick up the roles and do more as the priests dwindle. But if we continue to plant the seed, our priests will continue to grow, hopefully, and we will rebuild the numbers that we need. Thank you all so much for this time. God bless you.